I did not reclaim this land to sit on a throne or enjoy the taste of authority. I reclaimed it so every son and daughter of Burkina Faso, whether wealthy or struggling, could finally stand upon soil that truly belongs to them and to no outsider. Burkina Faso has taken one of the most daring and transformative steps seen in modern African governance. With a single national declaration, the country announced that every grain of soil, every hill, every valley, every field within its borders is now the collective property of the state. No individual, no matter how rich, no business, no matter how powerful, and no foreign entity, no matter how influential, can ever again lay permanent claim to Burkina Faso land. This announcement did not echo across the world because it was hostile. It shook global systems because it posed a direct challenge to a deeply rooted structure that has shaped Africa's land ownership for more than a century. For decades, land across the continent has silently been seized, traded, sold, and manipulated by powerful hands, local elites on one side and foreign corporations on the other. Farmers toiled on fields they had no legal right to. Entire villages were uprooted for mining concessions. Ancient communities watched their ancestral grounds fall into the hands of strangers, their heritage reduced to corporate real estate. Burkina Faso has brought this long and quiet injustice to a sudden end. With the stroke of one bold reform, the old model collapsed. From now on, the state does not act as a merchant selling the land to the highest bidder. It becomes the guardian, the protector of the land. Foreigners are not shut out entirely, but their path is strictly limited. They may apply for temporary leases, granted only under strict conditions. They cannot buy land today. They cannot buy it tomorrow. They cannot buy it ever. Even the wealthiest Burkina Faso elites can no longer accumulate thousands of hectares while ordinary families fight for a few square meters. This reform does something extraordinary. It redefines what ownership means. Land will no longer be determined by wealth, influence, or connections. Access to land will now be driven by citizenship, contribution, and national interest. Every Burkina Faso, rich or poor, male or female, young or old, now has the same legal right to use the land of their country, but the purpose is not to fence off the land or lock it away from development. The purpose is to protect it, ensure it serves food production, homes, clean energy, local industries, and national advancement rather than foreign profit. Burkina Faso's message to the world is clear and unwavering. Our land is not for sale, but it will always be for our people. This marks the birth of a new era, one where land becomes a source of dignity instead of a tool of exploitation. President Ibrahim Traoré did more than sign legislation. He reshaped the national consciousness. Many outside observers call the reform extreme, but for the ordinary citizen, it feels like a long-buried truth finally brought to light. The reform reflects something simple yet powerful. Land should belong to those who live on it, work on it, and depend on it, not to those who view it only as a financial asset. For decades, the global economic system treated African land as a commodity, something to be purchased, flipped, and used. Foreign developers obtained vast stretches for luxury estates, extractive industries, or export agriculture, while locals fought for survival nearby. Traoré's administration drew a firm line. Enough was enough. They halted this slow, quiet erosion of national space with honesty and courage. But the law does more than challenge foreign influence. It dismantles the internal inequality that has decayed African land ownership systems for generations. Wealthy families and political elites maintained massive landholdings. Small farmers rented scraps of land, always one step away from eviction. Traoré reversed the hierarchy. Under the new framework, everyone stands equal before the land. The era of secret acquisitions, corrupt deals, and private land empires has ended. This reform does not oppose development, it opposes abuse. Investors are still welcome, but under new terms. They must cooperate with the state, respect national goals, and ensure real benefits for the people. Burkina Faso no longer adjusts itself to foreign companies. Foreign companies must now adjust to Burkina Faso. The reform also revives a deeply rooted African value, the sacred bond between people and land. Long before colonization, Africans saw land not as a product, but as life, identity, memory, and continuity. With this decision, Traoré reconnects the country to this ancestral truth. By resisting global pressure and embracing transparency, Burkina Faso has opened a path toward true sovereignty, one that other African nations are now watching closely. For years, Africa has faced a slow but devastating crisis, the gradual loss of land to foreign powers and private corporations. It was not lost through conquest or invasion. It was lost through contracts, leases, and backroom agreements. Millions of hectares were surrendered to mining giants, industrial farms, oil companies, and tourism monopolies. Communities were abandoned, villages displaced, and farmers left with nothing but uncertainty. Burkina Faso decided that this cycle must never continue. The new law shuts the system down entirely. Foreign corporations can no longer claim vast territories. Local elites can no longer monopolize land that entire communities rely upon. The government recognized the danger lurking in the old model, farmers losing their fields, families losing their homes, and entire communities becoming strangers on their own land. Under the new system, the land is no longer a commodity, it becomes a national trust, a resource to be protected for future generations. This shift forces every citizen, every investor, and every institution to rethink the meaning of land. It becomes something to steward, not something to buy. The reform spans everything: agriculture, forests, water bodies, towns, mining sites, cultural areas, even sacred sites. Nothing can be quietly seized again. Foreign investors must now align with Burkina Faso's national priorities, not the demands of international markets. The era where African land was used to feed Europe while Africans faced shortages is over. But perhaps the most profound impact of this reform is psychological. The people feel secure again. Farmers plant without dread. Families build without fear. Communities thrive without constant threat of eviction. Land security becomes life security. This bold stance sends a message that echoes across continents. African land is not a playground for the wealthy or a marketplace for foreign interests.
It belongs to the people who breathe its air, walk its paths, and carry its history. Burkina Faso has also transformed the very foundation of land management. By making the state the custodian, not the seller, it has removed the chaos that existed in the old system. Corruption becomes harder. Disputes lessen. National projects become easier. Roads, schools, dams, and energy infrastructure can finally be built without negotiation battles with private owners. This is how nations rise. The reform enters its second phase, redistribution. This is not simply the handing out of land. This is the rebuilding of a nation. Small farmers come first. For years, they labored on borrowed land, living at the mercy of landlords and corporations. Now they receive secure access to farmland along with training, modern tools, and agricultural support. Women's cooperatives follow. The backbone of African agriculture finally receives the recognition and resources it deserves. Land is allocated to women's groups for farming, livestock, and food production. When women control land, communities rise. Youth, half of Burkina Faso's population, are next. Instead of fleeing to cities seeking non-existent jobs, young people now receive land, resources, and entrepreneurial opportunities. Agriculture becomes an industry of innovation instead of a field of struggle. For the first time, land equals opportunity. Land equals dignity. Land equals future. Burkina Faso is not shutting out the world. It is redefining partnership. The country welcomes investors, but only those who help strengthen national priorities: food security, jobs, environmental protection, and local development. Foreign companies can operate, but they can no longer take without giving. The reform also focuses on building local industries that can process raw materials inside the country instead of exporting them cheaply and buying them back at inflated prices. The goal is simple: grow in Burkina Faso, process in Burkina Faso, profit in Burkina Faso, jobs increase, local economies strengthen, food security stabilizes, national pride grows. Burkina Faso's boldness becomes contagious. Across Africa, Kenya, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, a quiet revolution begins. People discuss sovereignty. Students discuss liberation. Villages discuss justice. This new movement is driven not by governments alone, but by the people themselves. And whenever African nations rise, the West reacts with fear. The usual labels emerge: reckless, dangerous, unstable. But the pattern is predictable. Why does the West panic? Because African control over African land means No more cheap resources. No more leverage. No more dominance. But Burkina Faso did not fall. It grew stronger. The West slowly realizes a new truth. Africa is not alone anymore. Africa has partners. Africa has alliances. Africa has awakened. Sanctions, once feared, now reveal Western weakness, not African weakness. Zimbabwe survived them. South Africa resisted them. Now Burkina Faso stands firm. The fear is no longer on the African side. The land reform is more than policy. It is a movement powered not by politicians, but by the people themselves. Farmers return to their fields with pride. Young people engage in new opportunities. Women elevate their communities. Villages unite. The people know challenges will come. They know critics will shout. They know foreign powers will resist. But they also know this. When a nation rises with its people behind it, no external force can break it. This reform is not simply law. It is a rebirth, a reclaiming, a declaration. Burkina Faso has shown the world what sovereignty looks like, not in speeches, but in action, not in dreams, but in reality. The people are awake. The people are united. And once the people stand, nothing in this world can stop them.